I was looking at the New York Times website and I came across this article that had a video embedded in the middle of it. So I took a recording of it. So I'm going to play through that interaction. When you hover anywhere over the video, the triangle scales down and the circle around it fades in. Kind of a nice effect. It draws your attention to the fact that this is a video that you can click on rather than just a static image in the article. I thought it was a little weird how the triangle scales down kind of like in from the left side and the right side of it stays in place. Maybe there's a reason for that, maybe not. I figure if I recreate it, I can kind of find the answer to that. And it looks like it's using linear easing, which never looks great in this kind of an animation. So I can try using a nicer easing curve, try addressing the way it scales down. So I'm going to start by recreating it. I'll take a screenshot, then I'll go into Flinto here, paste in that screenshot, and I'm just going to draw over the screenshot to recreate this UI. I'm going to hit the V key to draw a vector shape. I'll zoom in on this and just draw the points of the triangle. Okay, and I'll make that white. I'll zoom back out and I want to draw like a big rectangle, so I'll hit R and draw a big rectangle that represents the image area there. Maybe make this a little darker. And I'm going to place that below the triangle that I created. Now I'm going to fade that out temporarily, so I'm just lowering the opacity. And I'm going to type in some text. And I don't care what it says because I'm just trying to recreate the interaction. All right, so I'll fade in the background again. Now the other thing that I need to create here is that circle that was around the triangle. And I want to make sure that I recreate it pretty exactly. So I'm going to go back to my little recording and take a screenshot of it. I'll paste that in here and try and line it up. And then I'll hit the O key to draw an oval and hold Shift to make it a perfect circle and just place that over the existing one. I'll turn off the fill, turn on the border, make the border 2 points and make it white. And then I'll just delete that screenshot. Now you might think, why is that circle overlapping the triangle? That looks really messed up. But that's actually how it is in their animation. If I go back here, right when the animation starts, you can see the circle just begins to fade in and the triangle is slightly overlapping right at the beginning of the animation. And that was sort of part of my initial critique of it, is that it scales down from the left side rather than evenly scaling from both sides, which means it's like off center at the beginning. So let's see if we can address that. But I'll leave it as is for now and just recreate it more exactly to start with. And so I'll fade out this circle. The circle is invisible at the beginning, so I'll fade that out. And this is what it looks like before you hover over it. So let's create the interaction. I'm going to use a behavior, so I'll select all these layers, the text, the background, the triangle, the circle, put them in a group, and I'll name it video player. And then I'm going to create a behavior for that group, so I'll click the behavior button. And here in the behavior designer, I'm going to start by adding a new state. And in this new state, the circle has faded in and the triangle has scaled down. So I'm going to scale it down. And I measured earlier the height of the triangle in the scaled down state is about 22 points. And I'm looking in the inspector as I resize this, and this is 21.68, so that's close enough, I think. And let me just center it. Whenever you're centering a triangle inside of a circle, you kind of just have to eyeball it. Because if you center it perfectly, it usually looks like it's a little off center. All right, so that looks good. Now if I click between these states, you can see the animation, and that pretty closely matches their animation. Now I want to set up the links between these states. So from the initial state, I want to have a link that covers the entire background here. So I'm just going to click on that, click Create Link, and target the new state. This will be mouse over, so I'll use a mouse over gesture that takes me to the new state. And then from the new state, with that same background layer selected, I'll create a link, and this one goes back to the initial state and uses a mouse out gesture. All right, so I've got the animation and the links set up. So let me pop into the preview, and now I can test it out. So when I hover anywhere into this video player, the animation happens. And that animation pretty closely matches their animation. Although I'm using the default spring easing in Flinto, and I believe they were using a linear easing. So I think this easing actually looks a little nicer. Cool, so that's kind of nice to be able to recreate that. but let's play with it a little bit. I wanted to try adjusting the triangle so that it starts more centered inside of the circle. So I'm back. I exited out of the behavior designer. I'm back in the canvas, and I'm selecting the circle, and I'm going to fade it in just temporarily so I can use it as a guide to reposition this triangle. So I'm going to nudge it over with the arrow keys and get it more centered inside of that circle. This way, when the animation starts, the triangle points aren't overlapping the circle, and it should scale down kind of more uniformly towards the center rather than moving in from the left. So I'll fade the circle back out, and I'll just jump into the behavior designer and test out the animation there. If I hold shift while I switch states, I can see the animation in slow motion, and I already like that a lot better. You don't see that overlapping in the corner, and it scales straight down to the center, which to me looks a lot more pleasing. Cool, let me open the preview. Can test it out. Yeah, I like it. Now, the reason they may have done it the way they did is because I've moved the triangle in the start state, in the beginning state. I moved it over to the right to get it to be centered within the circle. Maybe that puts it too close to the text. Maybe they wanted to have more space there. The other way they could do it is make the final state shifted over to the left. But again, maybe they didn't want to do that. But I think if they're okay with this amount of space between the circle and the text, then they're probably okay with that amount of space between the triangle and the text. Maybe that's even more consistent. So yeah, I actually like this a lot better. One other thing I want to play with is animating the border width. So right now the border just fades in. I think it would look really cool if the border went from 0 width to 2 points in addition to fading in. So to do that, I'll exit out of the behavior designer, and I'm going to adjust the initial state of this circle. So again, I'll fade it in just so we can see it while I do this. And the width right now is 2, but I'm going to move it down to 0. I'm also going to move the opacity down to 0. So now it's hidden because the width is 0 of the border and the opacity is 0. So once again, I'll jump back into the behavior designer, and in this final state, it fades in, but it's still 0 width. So I need to adjust that here, make the width of the border 2. And now I'll do it in slow motion. That looks really nice, I think. The border actually kind of grows. You know what might look even cooler is if it's scaled as well. So let's try that. It's 52 by 52. I can see in the inspector, this circle. I'm going to exit out of the behavior designer and edit the initial state of it by scaling it down a bit. So now it's 36 by 36. Back into the behavior designer because I want it to end at 52 by 52. There we go. So I scaled that back up in the end state here. And we can see how that looks. Well, maybe a little too much. I don't know, I think it looks kind of nice. I'll open up the preview again. Yeah, it's kind of cool. I would probably do it with the border animation, but with just the thickness animating and maybe not the scale. But this isn't so bad. Definitely draws attention to it, which is kind of what they were going for. But I definitely think that centered scale animation of the triangle looks a lot better. But hopefully this gives you an idea of how you can quickly test out some ideas and experiment with things like this, because you can just imagine if you were working on this and you're the designer, you could sort out all these things, try all these things, and figure out the right way the animation should look before it ever gets built. And then if you're building it, you can build it as you designed it, or if you're giving it to another developer, you can show them exactly what you want because you'd already thought through it and they can see it, which works way better than just saying, make the triangle scale down, make the circle fade in, because that leaves a lot to chance, as we could see. That seems pretty, specific, but as we saw here, there's a lot of details and different approaches with the easing, with the way the triangle scales, all of those things. So it's nice to sort out those details if you really care about the animation.